G'day viewers, in this episode I'm going to walk you through the derivation of Bob Lazar's 7.46 Hz gravity B wave frequency claim. But before we start the journey we need to establish its significance. So the question is, why is Lazar's gravity B wave frequency claim so important? Well, as I've mentioned on previous episodes, this claim does not require any of his story to be true or even exist. It does not require space aliens, it does not require Area 51, it does not require S4, and it does not require element 115. This specific claim by Bob Lazar is standalone, which in fact describes a quantum vacuum property of the Earth at its surface. It is altitude specific. For example, the frequency value in high Earth orbit is vastly different to the frequency value at the surface of the Earth, which is 7.46 Hz, according to Bob Lazar. For the UFO enthusiasts watching this video, you'll know from observational experience of documentaries, etc., that no rock-solid, irrefutable evidence of anything relating to UFOs has ever been presented. Everything you've ever seen could have been faked or relies upon human testimony, or relies upon personal reputation, or relies upon personal credibility, or relies upon a trust me factor. Nothing, absolutely nothing which has ever been presented to the public has ever passed rigorous scientific scrutiny, nor could it ever pass rigorous scientific testing. Everything you've ever seen could literally be smoke and mirrors. Everything you've ever seen could literally be a distraction story intended to lure you away from the domestic or international political issues of the day. Having said all this, there is one singular exception, and that is Bob Lazar's gravity B wave frequency claim. This claim was posted on the boblazar.com website sometime between 1990 and 2016. 2016 was the last time the site was updated, so I can only assume that the 7.46 Hz gravity B wave frequency claim was posted in 2016. I do not have any recollection of seeing this value on his website prior to 2016. In fact, I only recall discovering this claim on his website in about 2018. However, on his website, element 115 is listed as unum pentium, which is its official temporary designation. It received its permanent official designation of Moscovium in 2015. Therefore, erring on the side of caution, we shall assume Bob has been a little lazy with the new name of element 115 and added his 7.46 Hz frequency value to his website in 2016. Our guess is probably incorrect, but it's the safest bet by being the worst case scenario. What I'm about to say now is extremely important, so please pay attention. The reason Bob's claim is so critical is because it's a precise statement which we can test. It doesn't exist in mainstream physics and in fact potentially represents a window into new physics. Therefore, any theoretical solution leading to his 7.46 Hz assertion is positive proof that Bob Lazar was telling the truth about his extraterrestrial story. Bottom line, because we can't verify any part of his story, we have no choice but to assess the veracity of his whole story based upon the only artifact which we can verify. Hence, his 7.46 Hz gravity B wave frequency claim is the linchpin. If Bob Lazar lied in other parts of his story, and I'm not saying that he lied at all, then that's no big deal because all human beings lie. You've lied, I've lied, politicians lie, priests lie, teachers lie, students lie, children lie, parents lie, husbands lie, wives lie, everybody lies. That's why we have legal systems to figure out the truth. Lying is a natural and normal part of being human. As Jesus said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. What Bob Lazar did not lie about is his 7.46 Hz gravity B wave frequency claim. Once again, mathematically proving this, as we shall do in this presentation, is positive proof that the Bob Lazar story is genuine. It is the only piece of testable scientific evidence we have. Therefore, the veracity of his entire story rests upon the shoulders of this one piece of scientific evidence. I want everybody to understand and accept that all documentation can be faked, no matter its source. I want everyone to understand and accept that all spoken testimony can be wrong, either by genuine mistake or by deception. Above all, we can never ever take the spoken or written word of any human being as gospel. Ask yourself why banks do not loan you money without proof of being able to repay them. Your word, your promise to repay isn't strong enough. Why? Why do banks insist upon proof? Well, that's an easy question to answer. Banks want proof because people lie. People are deceptive and emotionally manipulative. Banks know this, therefore they want proof. Okay, now that I've insulted your intelligence enough, we'll move on to the next key issue in Lazar's scientific explanation of gravity. Bob Lazar asserts that two forms of gravity exist. One form operates on an atomic scale, the other form operates on a planetary scale. He refers to them as gravity A and gravity B respectively. Gravity B is what we're going to cover in this episode, but don't worry, we'll look at gravity A in another episode. With respect to gravity B, Lazar describes the Earth as propagating a so-called gravity B wave. That is, he describes gravity as a wave. The problem with this description is that waves vary with time and is further compounded by the fact that he gives it a low frequency value, 7.46 Hz to be exact. In other words, the gravity B wave should vary with peaks and troughs every 0.134 seconds, according to Bob Lazar. So the obvious question becomes, why don't we measure time-varying gravity at the surface of the Earth? Why do we measure and experience gravity to be constant? Has Bob Lazar lied? No, Bob Lazar has not lied. He simply doesn't understand the how and why associated with his 7.46 Hz frequency claim. Bob Lazar has repeatedly stated that he doesn't understand the details about how gravity works. He only knows the broad brushstrokes he was able to read in his briefing sessions at S4. So, does that mean that I don't trust Bob Lazar? Well, trust is irrelevant. In science, we don't trust anyone. We want proof. Reproducible, repeatable, verifiable proof. Okay, so how do we reconcile the time-varying behaviour inferred by Bob Lazar with the observable constant behaviour of gravity at the surface of the Earth? Well, as it turns out, this problem was solved by a French mathematical genius over 200 years ago. His name was Joseph Fourier. Fourier proved, not showed, but actually proved that it's possible to build a constant function by adding a large number of waves together in a certain way. We now call this certain way a Fourier distribution. It's also known as a Fourier series. What this means from a Lazar perspective is that gravity is not a single wave, it's actually a spectrum of waves. In other words, the gravity B wave described by Bob Lazar is actually many waves added together with a resultant frequency of 7.46 Hz. This physical principle is called wave function superposition. We'll show you why the resultant wave oscillation at 7.46 Hz doesn't contradict the constant gravity condition we experience at the surface of the Earth as we move through the solution. On the matter of thermionic energy conversion, Lazar claims that the space aliens have achieved 100% efficiency. He also states that this breaks our understanding of thermodynamics. Well, Lazar is certainly correct that it would break our understanding of thermodynamics, but the reality is that, on this issue, the space aliens cannot possibly achieve 100% thermionic efficiency. How so? Well, to achieve 100% thermionic efficiency, they would need to be able to make instrumentation measurements accurate to an infinite number of decimal places. However, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle precludes this from happening. Hence, it is extremely clear that even the space aliens could not make measurements accurate to an infinite number of decimal places. In addition to this, to verify that they've achieved 100% thermionic efficiency, they'd need to observe the process running for an infinite amount of time. But how can this be when the universe is less than 15 billion years old? So, where does this leave us? How can we interpret Lazar's 100% thermionic efficiency claim? Well, the most logical explanation is that the space alien thermionic energy conversion technology is beyond our measurement technology. In other words, human technology can't read enough decimal places to confirm that the thermionic efficiency is less than 100%. Bottom line, 100% thermionic efficiency is actually an illusion caused by the limitation in human measurement technology. We simply cannot read enough decimal places when making measurements. Alright then, enough talking, let's get into the main course. To begin the journey, we need to travel back in time a few hundred years, back to the era of Sir Isaac Newton. Newton was the first person to build an understanding of gravity. The next gravity person to come along was Albert Einstein. Einstein developed the theory of general relativity, which supplanted the classical concept of gravity based upon forces with the concept of space-time curvature. Plenty of information about Newton and Einstein is available on the internet, so I won't dive into detail. You can investigate for yourself. After Einstein, a team of 3 guys came along. Their names are Bernard Haisch, Alfonso Rueda, and Hal Puthoff. These guys asked the simple question, what is inertia? Inertia is a body's resistance to acceleration and is equivalent to experiencing a gravitational force. Therefore, by working on this question, they took important steps towards the development of quantum vacuum theory. Consequently, Hal Puthoff developed the polarizable vacuum model of gravity, which is an equivalent representation of general relativity. This combined our modern understanding of gravity with the genius of Newton's work in optics. In simple terms, Hal Puthoff developed an optical model of gravity which is equivalent to general relativity. This means that the highly complex nature of general relativity can be replaced with a much simpler and far more intuitive model of gravity utilising the concept of refractive index. If you've studied optical theory in high school, you'll be able to get your head around the polarizable vacuum model of gravity. About 40 years after Sir Isaac Newton passed away in 1727, a French super genius was born named Joseph Fourier. To cut a long story short, Joseph Fourier achieved many significant outcomes, but the specific miracle we're interested in is his method for building any shape of wave simply by adding garden variety sine waves together. This technique is the foundation of what we nowadays call wave function superposition. To be very specific, we're interested in building a square wave utilising his technique. We're going to show you that Lazar's gravity B wave frequency claim can be derived utilising a mathematical method which is over 200 years old. What we're going to do in this presentation is tie general relativity, the quantum vacuum and the polarizable vacuum all together utilising Fourier mathematics. In other words, we're going to seamlessly blend everything in the red box with everything in the blue box. A critical result which all viewers need to understand, embrace and retain is that this is a purely mathematical technique, so absolutely no counter-argument exists. It is literally impossible to argue against the result we'll derive, because it sits independently of physics. It is a mathematical fact. In other words, we can't argue against 1 + 1 = 2, it's a mathematical fact and we must accept it. Okay, now that we have established the basics and identified our tool set, let's dig a little deeper. The kind of wave we're interested in is the square wave. Fourier showed us over 200 years ago that we can build a perfectly square wave by adding normal sine waves together in a special way. This special way contains 2 spectra, that is, an amplitude spectrum and a frequency spectrum. This Fourier technique is very well established and easy to learn about on the internet, so I'll leave this up to you. I'm trying to keep this video as conceptually simple as possible. When we execute a full wave rectification process, that's engineering speak for taking the mathematical magnitude of the wave, we obtain a constant function with a value of 1. This is an extremely important result, so please keep it in mind. So, what does the mathematical process we have executed actually mean? What value is any of this? Well, what we have achieved is the quantization of the number 1. Multiplying the number 1 by anything doesn't break or change any equation or associated physics. However, multiplying gravitational acceleration at the surface of the Earth by our version of number 1 shows how gravity at the surface of the Earth can be decomposed into a spectrum of waves, not just the single wave that Lazar talked about. This was a mistake made by Bob Lazar. He didn't lie about his single wave concept, he just didn't know the answer. Thus, what the genius of Joseph Fourier shows us is that any point in a gravitational acceleration field contains a spectrum of gravitational acceleration waves, not just a single and unique wave that Bob Lazar has claimed. So then, how do we explain the single gravity B wave that Lazar talks about? That's a good question. Let's work out the answer. The first thing we need to grasp is the concept of harmonics. This illustration should be familiar to everyone. You should have explored this in high school. However, the reason I've brought it to your attention now is because you need to keep this concept in your mind's eye as we move on to the next slide. Getting back to the unit amplitude square wave, we'll begin by imagining that the square wave has a period of hundreds of trillions of years. Because its period is many orders of magnitude older than the age of the observable universe, we can simplify our unit amplitude square wave by only considering the first half of the wave. That is, we can ignore the second half of the wave, where the amplitude is negative. Even though full wave rectification already solves this issue for us. So we're only going to consider the part of the square wave when the amplitude is positive. This step simplifies the analysis a little bit. Here are some ground rules you'll need to know in order to understand the graphs properly. The solid red line denotes the resultant wave from the Fourier technique. The resultant wave, as the name suggests, is the result we obtain by adding harmonic sine waves together. Please revisit the previous slide if you need to. The dashed blue line denotes the average value of the resultant wave. The average value is important, so we'll circle back to it a bit later. Graph number 1 displays the resultant wave from adding the first harmonic to a zero starting condition. The first harmonic is also called the fundamental harmonic. Graph number 2 displays the resultant wave from adding the first and third harmonics. Graph number 3 displays the resultant wave from adding the first, third and fifth harmonics. As you can see, the pattern forming is pretty obvious. You've also probably noticed that only the odd harmonics are added. That's because the even harmonics have no mathematical effect, so they're left out. Fourier's technique is very well known and widely available for you to learn if you have the desire to do so. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm trying to only include essential information. Hopefully you remember that I mentioned the average value of the resultant wave a bit earlier. If we set the condition that, as a minimum, we need at least 99.9% of the value of the number 1, what harmonic mode must we sum to? In other words, what is the number of the harmonic that we must use in order to achieve an average value of resultant wave of 0.999? Is it 23? Is it 101? Is it 201? Well, as it turns out, the harmonic mode number that satisfies this condition is 415. We call this the Lazar harmonic. So, the next obvious question is, why is the Lazar harmonic significant? Now is the moment you've been waiting for. Our table of results show that at the Lazar harmonic limit, greater than 99.9% of gravity at the surface of the Earth is eliminated. The corresponding operational frequency value for a spaceship hovering at the surface of the Earth, as described by Bob Lazar, is 7.43 Hz. This is astonishingly close to Lazar's gravity B wave frequency value of 7.46 Hz. Therefore, we have mathematically demonstrated that gravity isn't a single wave, but a spectrum of waves acting together. Moreover, we have correctly and accurately derived the gravity B wave frequency value as claimed by Bob Lazar. So, does this mean that the Lazar story is true? Well, considering that the gravity B wave frequency is the only scientifically testable artifact Lazar provides, then yes, the Lazar story is true. No scientific evidence is available to contradict his story. By now, some of you are probably asking, why not target higher harmonics and eliminate more gravity? Well, if you look at the table carefully, you'll see that it's basically a case of diminishing returns. For relatively minor increases in harmonic mode number, the reduction in gravity isn't worth the investment of effort. Moving from n equals 415 to n equals 1015 requires almost 36 times more power amplification. In a nutshell, we can say that the Lazar harmonic is the optimal solution. Please take a moment to pause the video and study the table. Okay, so what about other gravitational environments? What does the solution look like for them? On this slide, we display the Lazar solution for various gravitational environments. You can see by inspection that for the celestial bodies in our solar system, the pulse frequency is more or less the same. This is an encouraging result because it makes intuitive sense. In the case of the supermassive black hole example, the pulse frequency and power amplification factor is quite different, as you'd expect it to be very close to the event horizon. So, once again, everything hangs together and makes intuitive sense. Please take a moment to pause the video and study the table. Now, let's summarise what we've learned so far. You can see from the results we've obtained that we have successfully derived the Lazar gravity B wave frequency utilising a mathematical technique developed by Joseph Fourier over 200 years ago. The similarity between the theoretical value and the alleged Lazar experimental value is greater than 99.64%. We have also demonstrated that the single gravity B wave phenomenon claimed by Bob Lazar is in reality a spectrum of gravity B waves added together. Please note that you can utilise the equation shown to calculate the gravity B wave frequency for any gravitational environment you wish, that is, outside a black hole. Thus, the likelihood of Bob Lazar randomly guessing a value so close to the theoretical solution is absurd in the extreme. If you look at the full derivation process in the links shown, you'll see that it is so technically complicated that the idea of Bob Lazar fumbling his way through to the theoretical solution is pure fantasy. Therefore, based upon the mathematical proof we have derived, the Bob Lazar story appears to be genuine. That is, in the absence of any verifiable mathematical or scientific evidence contradicting our conclusion. In other words, there is no rational reason to dispute Lazar's story. All other public domain evidence presented to date regarding Lazar's story is credibility based, and as we all know, evidence based upon credibility or documentation from any source is no evidence at all. For mathematically minded viewers wishing to understand the nuts and bolts of our derivation process, please refer to the links shown.